World Championships. This is the candidates. The winner of the candidates will face Yasugi 99 later this year in a match for the world title. We will be watching VariantsOnly from Finland versus burpcow of Canada, I think. Both players are online. I expect a very tense match, and the outcome is difficult to predict. VariantsOnly has had a bad start to the tournament, losing big against Zixon from Sweden 2-8, and also a narrow loss against Clearcast from the Netherlands 4-6. Whereas burpcow started off with a tie against the finisher. Strong performance there by burpcow. When you look at the ratings, they are fairly equal, and actually the match is on. As we can see, they only played each other 3 times. Burpcow in a 2-1 lead, but that doesn't say much about the outcome tonight. So we see VariantsOnly playing white against burpcow. Neither playing being an opening wizard, but they have great experience, and they are really tricky. I was particularly impressed by VariantsOnly when he got a bit on tilt, started playing some funny openings and just going berserk. And that's where he is at his best, I think. So VariantsOnly is spending a lot of time here in the opening. Black putting pressure on c3. Maybe we will see a knight landing on e4. White also has some pressure here with the bind of the black knight on c6. Hi there, everybody. And we have a prediction, 6-4 in favor of VariantsOnly. My own prediction is 5-5. Let's see whose crystal ball is the best. This move might induce a passive pawn drop on f6. That is not where black wants to put his pawn. So that was a slight success for white, I would say. Although not a big concession for black. Maybe white should simply put his pawn on e4. Thus putting pressure on the knight on d5 and also preventing a black knight from landing on e4. But he chose a more calm continuation, simply castling. So these knights are pointing towards c3. Not so easy to defend the pawn. You don't want to put the pawn on b2. That's a similarly passive pawn drop, just like pawn at f6. So white rather just goes forward, leaving the pawn on c3 en prise. A common tactical trick here is to simply take with the knight on e5, because if that will leave the bishop hanging on b5. And if white takes on d7, black can take back with the knight on d7. Actually, I kind of like this idea at the moment. burpcow thinking. I don't see anything wrong with taking the pawn on e5. But burpcow chooses another continuation. Maybe it's still a possibility to take on e5. Yes. So we see that little tactical trick I was mentioning. So if white takes on d7 now, you simply take back with the knight. And the knight is no longer hanging. And taking b5 is the threat, and also, of course, taking f3 looks nasty. I expect rook g8 here, yeah. Anticipating an opening of the g file. And at some point black might even consider taking on e5, giving the queen for 2 pieces. burpcow thinking too much. Yes, he goes for the trade of the queen for 2 pieces, and black has a lot of stuff in hand now. He will need to create some sort of weakness here. The f3 square is where black would like to put a knight, so maybe at some point pawn h3, trying to lure the pawn away from the protection of f3. This move simply puts a piece on the board. Black has a lot of pieces, he needs to get them into play. And this is a great spot, blocking the e file and also protecting a lot of black squares here. And white wants to open the e file, because if black takes here, maybe... No. I was thinking taking on, putting a knight on f6, but that was just nothing. Okay, so looks like a time scramble here in the first game. A lot of piece activity here for black. Black only needs a couple of moves to get a really nasty attack going. This knight on d5 is a monster, and maybe white should simply have taken on d5. So the knight on f4 is protected. If the queen takes, you have knight at e2. And this bishop is covering e8, which might prove important. Down to the last seconds now. And suddenly it was possible to pick up the knights. And that will hurt. Yeah, for sure. That was mate. A cute little finish there by VariantsOnly. Black lost the thread somehow. I thought black had a great position. Hi there, Zaraza, and all the others in the chat. Okay. Quite a company. Tjena Mårten and everybody else. Black playing a pawn sacrifice line, and white immediately puts his extra pawn to work, trying to weaken the dark squares. But the threat on f2 was really nasty, and white decides to give a pawn just to cover f2. And VariantsOnly playing quickly here in the opening. This bishop eyeing the pawn on h7. And of course white would like to just simply take on e4 and then play knight at f6. So black covers f6. Maybe pawn c6 would be a nasty move. Yeah, I was wondering also why didn't he take with the bishop on d4, but I guess the bishop on c5 covers some dark squares here. Oh, I'm on front page of Lichess. Thank you so much. Okay. So I'm thinking pawn c6 and then simply take on d7 and knight f6. But this bishop is covering all the mates here, so maybe black will have time to simply take on f2, and I'm not sure. But what can get out of the threat towards the queen and simply check on e2. Yes, and indeed he plays pawn at c6. And I'm wondering here, a very sharp position. Surely you cannot allow black taking on f2. You will need to... I was a bit surprised that he didn't play knight to h3 maybe, but... Okay, maybe the king will get safe on f1. And now obviously white is looking to play knight at f6. And if black wastes the tempo defending f6, this bishop will get away. So black chooses to defend in another way, taking g5, but now he allowed knight c7 check. And look, rather than taking the rook in the corner, white retreats with the knight. A lot of threats here. Look how weak these squares are. White would love to put some pawns here. This bishop doing a superb defensive job here, as well as offensive. Black's position really loose here. Knight b7 is a threat. Not easy to defend here for black. And that looks really slow. Yeah, white will simply pick up the bishop, I think. And now black needs to look out, because a knight check here followed by a knight check here will probably fork and win the queen. Yeah, and possibly just putting pawns here on the back rank, or simply picking up the rook for nothing. As you can see, knight here will fork also. Yeah, the black position is probably just hopeless. One threat here is knight h6. Maybe bishop h6, and I mean black doesn't have any threats whatsoever. Perhaps this wasn't the most precise move though. So white wants to lure the rook away, so we can play the queen at g8. And black will need to move the rook away, because if he protects the rook, white will simply take the rook and then play queen at g8. And I don't see any threats for black. Obviously, the queen is also threatening h7, so what do you do? So queen takes h7 and followed by queen g8, and it's mate. A nice win there by burpcow. And we see the same opening as in the first game. And the match has started just as I predicted. This will be a very close race indeed. And I'm surprised that white repeats this line. Although this is slightly different. Maybe this is a much better version. Because if you can get a knight for g7 here, you actually have an attack going. I'm thinking, for instance, knight c3, take, and then simply knight g7 and then retreat. Something like that. And this looks like prep for VariantsOnly, who has more time than when he started. Just to make sure my comments will get better and better as the match proceeds, I will have a little sip here. Cheers! I wanted to remind you that in a few hours we will see Yan Li facing Bagzilla, a great Aussie match between two legends. I won't be covering that match, but I think we will have someone streaming late tonight. So, not a terrific spot for the night, but what can you do? So now knight at g7 is a threat, so black quickly puts the rook on the g5. I think it's in 3 hours time. A classic dark square attack on the king side, attacking f6, and if black puts a pawn on g7, maybe pawn at h6 will come. So what do you do here? Do you simply enter the black position with the queen, or it sure looks like a threat to just pick up the h pawn and well, what do I know? White doesn't want to take on c6. Not quite yet. Just maybe at the right time. But if you take on c6, black can take with the bishop and also get a way to escape with the king. I like this move. But what happens if white takes with the queen? You take here. Knight g7. How much of a problem is knight g7? Well, it is a problem because now you cannot go this way. This will leave the king stranded here, and you can simply take on e6, and it's bad. Really bad. So actually black needs to go to the queen side. Okay, all is not lost for black. At least now his king will be slightly safe for a while. And also white is a bit loose here. And his pieces are buried here on the king side, so good decision by black there. And white wants to disturb the black defensive setup. The king is trapped here. Maybe bishop takes here, followed by knight d4 is a threat. And obviously if you take the knight, pawn at c6 will bring the king out even further. And of course bishop takes c6, king takes c6, the king is out on the board, but white doesn't have many pieces. And as you can see, these guys are not participating in the attack. White trying to find a hole in the black defense, and now I think he has found one. Surely grabbing that queen will help him. I'm thinking take, and then take on d8. And black won't have time to pick up the queen on d2 because you were threatening queen e6, I think. And this spells doom for black. Queen at f7 mate. So only white wins this far. Classic piece sacrifice by black. I don't know, this looks a bit unusual. And also burpcow starts thinking here. Rather than putting the knight on f3 where it doesn't have much of a future, white decides to put it on f4 instead, threatening d5. And maybe you can induce a passive pawn placement here on e6. Try to make the game a bit more chess-like. Actually, knight at h5 maybe might be an idea. Well, white's simply developing, hoping to make use of that extra material at some point. Yes, and as OK points out, if you need something to watch between the Crazy House candidate games, you can always watch the finals of the women's US Open tennis. So this looks very impressive, but I think maybe white missed an opportunity there with knight h5. Doesn't look quite as good right now. Black trying to swing this knight over to the king side, but the pressure on d5 is a bit annoying. So where is this queen going? Well, first of all, it's pointing towards d5, so making it harder for black to push in the center. This looks a bit odd, but black was running out of moves, I think. Typical pseudo sacrifice. Black cannot afford to trade off his dark squared bishop, because a bishop on d4 would be just too strong for black to handle. And white was threatening maybe at some point to demolish the black defenses. Black needs to look out for a knight trade here on g6. This is absolutely the position that white wants when he accepts the piece sacrifice. Black's position is way too rigid to give any kind of full compensation. Now e6 is weak as well. You might consider taking on c6 and then taking e6 maybe. Or take g6 and then e6. I don't know. White was threatening to take on h6, provoking another pawn advance here by black. But this one looks better than the previous one. Maybe white will simply ignore the threat towards the bishop. No, he moves away. And pawn at f6 is probably coming. So black got a bit active here. This queen might get trapped, maybe. Still, okay, so he decides to give the queen for a piece and a pawn, ripping up the black queen side. The king is naked, but white doesn't have any heavies, although he does threaten to take on f8. And black is looking to get a knight here, and now he threatens mate in a few moves. Knight h3 followed by knight f3, and queen g1 is mate. And burpcow, well, He only has a few seconds left. Will we see the first black win here? The bishop in the corner looking a bit miserable. But, rook here followed by rook takes h4 was certainly interesting. White looks safe here. A lot of pieces defending the white king and dangerous pawns here. Heavy in hand for white. This move blocks h5, so white cannot put a pawn there. But it looks now like black has succeeded in... I take that back. So I suppose you don't just take the knight on h4. Okay, he traded queens. Check here, take with check maybe. Burpcow living off his extra time now. One little slip will cost him the game. But variance only is also down to its last few seconds. Probably not the best moves being played right now. Both players trading mistakes. But this is a time scramble, so I forgive them. And Burpcow got that one. That could have ended both ways. So 2-2. Only white wins this far. Exciting games. Cheers. VariantsOnly playing a theoretical line, which is a bit tricky, I have heard. So he has to look out a little bit here. White actually threatening to mate in one here with knight to f6. Discovered double checkmate. So black needs to find a way to close the e-file. But maybe a pawn here is simply good for white. So this knight is threatening e5. I expect some kind of pawn h6 move just to try to get rid of the g-pawn so you can play knight at f6. And also white might consider simply taking on c4 at some point. Not sure why he doesn't play pawn at h6 though. White winning a lot of time here though. And I'm not sure the bishop is actually better here on e7 than it was on f8. Surely there will come something here on h6 soon. Hi there, gingerbread man. So, quite a few viewers. It's Saturday night, Crazy House World Championship, and a bit of Motorhead dark premium rum mixed with Coke. So, what is VariantsOnly thinking here? What opening is best? Well, actually, playing e6, d5 isn't bad at all. And you can certainly push your c-pawn as well. You can play just about any opening, as long as you play it well. And as long as you play it quickly. That is the key. Well, I haven't really watched Crazy House before, and I started playing just a bit for fun when I got in shape for the Swedish Bughouse Championships 2 years ago. So I don't know much about Crazy House really, and I'm happy so many showed up to enjoy my babbling, and hopefully I will say something intelligent at some point. So the white queen is being pushed around here, and at some point white needs to stop being pushed around. So will we see a queen sacrifice on f7 followed by knight at g5? I'm not sure. Is that really good? Looks like the king can hide on e7. This looks dubious. Yeah, the king hides on e7. Rook f7, king e8, and it's white who gets checkmated, I think. I think we will see our first win for black here. This threatens g5 and also queen at h2 mate. And when this guy goes, the rook on f7 will be hanging, and also you threaten knight at f3 maybe. So knight at f3 is a huge threat, king takes f7 is another threat. And you can still probably play knight at f3. Oh well, this is just over. So, knight at f3 coming here pretty soon. That wasn't the best queen sacrifice, actually. That was sloppy by burpcow. Why didn't he simply take with the pawn instead? Oh, burpcow messed up here, but maybe there is some sort of forced mate here. Otherwise he'll be banging his head against the computer screen. What did he do here? Is there a forced mate? Yes, there is. So queen g2. Queen here. Yeah, it's mate. So, first break by burpcow. He wins with black. I'm not sure what point at what point there, Kaika, but white did have f3 protected, I think. But the big question is, why didn't he take with the pawn on f6? Guess who you are? I don't know who you are. Probably a Swede, since you know my first name. And VariantsOnly sure knows his way around these openings. Looks like the white opening is just a big failure here. The white king side is wide open. Obviously threatening mate here, but such pressure here on the white position. Black just playing natural moves. And white is getting pushed over the board here. Oh, I beat you last time? I don't win that often. Who can you be? Impressive play here by VariantsOnly. Looks like white slipped in the opening, and VariantsOnly shows no mercy. So, of course, he could have picked up the rook here, but yeah. The black attack is just too strong here. So probably just sacrifice the queen and then take d1. Or take d1 first. Because white really doesn't have time to pick up that rook or whatever. And the black king is actually quite safe. And I expect the queen to take here maybe. Because you have tricks like take f1, rook drop here, queen check here, take the bishop, and the attack is still going. Malte! Tjenare! Jag såg din kommentar där på Facebook. Kul att du dök upp. So rook check here is strong, I think. Followed by queen check, pick up the bishop. And I don't see how black can survive. Queen check. If the bishop goes back, you can take on g1. Yes, if queen b5, queen at e2, yeah, probably you just take e2, I suppose. Although actually the material is balanced here, so maybe it's not so dangerous. Queen at b5, queen at e2. Maybe this isn't as good as I thought for black. So that looks a bit risky. Of course you want to get rid of the bishop here. Then you have queen at d1 followed by die on e2, but what happens here? Maybe the black king is safe. So if white takes here, do you take the bishop? White trying to close some exits for the black king, also bringing the rook into play. And probably it was wise to block with the queen, because otherwise queen that takes d6 at some point could have been a threat. Oh, does white really have time to put his queen down here? I wonder. He does threaten to play rook c7, but it's out of play here on b8. Both players down to their last 20 seconds, and I don't see a clear way for black to attack here. Looks like white has everything under control. Rook c7 happening. Okay, so you need to take with the... I thought he would take with the other piece. So he could have had a discovered check. Now the king goes to the corner, and this is just winning, I think, for white. Although look out for bishop takes d2. But yeah, queen sacrifice and a quick mate. Burpcow up 4-2, and now we see the classical variants only tilt line. Bring the rook out early, and actually I think he's been scoring really well in this opening. Yeah, that was a huge threat, taking d7 and sacrificing on d6. And if you're new to this game, you need to keep in mind that the rook is worth about the same as knight or a bishop, so it's not so crazy as it might look to bring the rook out so early. Bring the rook out so early in the game. Actually, I wonder if you can take on e5 here. You get a pawn and you get a piece, and the white squares are really weak for black. Yes, it does go for the queen sacrifice. I like this. So all sorts of interesting ideas for white here. I think this is good for white. Just super good for white. His light pieces are dominating the board. Pawn at a6, or simply taking c6, obviously. Lots of threats here. And let's see if white calculated this correctly. Black giving back his queen. And white actually doesn't have to take on c6. He can save that for later. Because the queen is pinned and the bishop was protected. So what do you do with white here? Now that the bishop is gone, you're not any longer protecting e2. And this rook is such a hero. I love this line. So rather than putting the pawn on f7, he puts the bishop here, because now if king d7, he can take on e6, and at some point knight f5 might be strong also. Knight g6 can be interesting, because knight g6, king takes here, you take in the corner with check. A cowardly move for white would be to place the queen on e2. Maybe check here first and then play queen e2, but white goes all in, clearing a lot of space around the black king, threatening queen f7, check. This is probably winning now. Yeah, bishop takes e6, and white doesn't have time. Black doesn't have time to pick up the rook. This check covers f7, very important. And you cannot take here because of the knight e4. So pawn drop. Or do you drop the pawn here on g4 just to threaten the queen? Yeah, maybe pawn g4. Time is ticking. Yeah, pawn g4. And now maybe knight here, yes. And where is that knockout blow? Is there even one? You need a knight for b7. Wow. White is having some problems here. He's getting mated. Pawn b4. Ouch! Burpcow leading by 5-2. And this has been the story of the whole tournament for VariantsOnly. Not quite taking his chances when he has a good position. Which I'm sure he was. A nice little piece sacrifice line here. If white takes here, his center is demolished and the pawn on c5 will probably get picked up sooner or later. I'm not sure. We're probably out of the books in just a little while here. It looks natural to simply take the knight. Why shouldn't you? So is this some sort of famous line? I saw some game where black even gave, I think, a queen or something and mated some strong player. But it looks horrible, I think. This cannot be good. It cannot be good. So many threats here. Queen is hanging. C6 is hanging. And this is just wishful thinking. So the question is, do you take the queen or do you take c6? I'm not sure. Both look good. Yeah. This is probably more solid. And white has a lot of stuff. Bishop here maybe. Black actually managing to create some counterplay here. Will VariantsOnly swindle his way out of this? I thought the king looked safe on e2 actually. King e2, knight takes, queen takes. But what do I know? Is it time for queen takes f2 maybe? Queen takes f2, knight takes, queen goes here. This is a weird position. I think when queen takes, knight takes, and bishop takes h4, yeah. All of a sudden the white king is sort of safe, I think. And if you take the rook here, white can counterattack. If black had had a knight in hand, he could have played queen here, followed by knight e2, but he doesn't. So what to interpose with? Is black looking to play knight here and take with the queen on h4 maybe? White might even consider putting the queen there, yeah. Queen f1. Because if now queen d1, you'd simply take with the king here. But now black has all the pieces he needs to deliver checkmate, so white needs to find something quickly. Because queen here, pawn here, rook here is mate in a few. And this is winning, right? Queen here, pawn here, rook here. Or am I blind? Why did he play it like that? Was I missing something? It wouldn't be the first time, but it sure looked like mate to me. Now it looks like white is simply winning here. Crashing through in the dark squares. He can bring this bishop to h6, providing some extra lift. Yes, because queen at d1 was mate, right? And this is also mate, but the wrong person is getting mated. Let me just show what variants only missed there. It was at this point. Mate in 4, yeah. Queen at d1. Very simple mate. And after white interposes here, you just put the diag here and the rook on f1, and it's over. Not variants only tournament this. Let me just follow him. Okay, so this is 6-2 in favor of burpcow. Yeah, even I saw it. And you do want the queen on d1 because the queen is blocking e2. And I feel variants only is playing a bit reckless here, I think. He's given up. And burpcow is smelling blood. Every game counts. So it does matter if you lose by 8-2 rather than 6-4. Because every game is counted. Oh, nice little tactical trick. Netting a pawn. A very important pawn also. Take here, the bishop takes on d5. White needs to go back, and maybe this pin is a bit awkward. Although it's probably not, because if you take here, you just put a bishop here, and then knight white just got will land on c7, I think. Black trying to find some attack, but white has a lot of space around the king, so even if black gets a few checks in here, white king is safe. Härligt! Prova, det är skitkul här att spela. F1 looks perfectly safe. Black would need, of course, a queen or maybe a knight here to keep the attack going. But he doesn't have it. Burpcow trying to squeeze some water out of the rock here, but it looks really, really dry. Yeah, I hope to see you soon. Take care, Malte. And maybe Burpcow went to the fridge and got himself a beer. Sounds like a sound plan. Now he's threatening mating too. Pawn g3 followed by rook h2. But I suppose white could take with the queen here. Black has sacrificed a lot. A bishop check here somewhere, yeah, on b5 will force black to place his pawn, the pawn that he needs to have the mate. But now he's getting mating himself. So pawn here, knight here, queen on at g7. And finally, VariantsOnly wins the game again. 6-3 Burpcow, and this is the last game. Last game of the match. So we see the same theoretical duel here. And this is clearly prep, taking with the pawn rather than the bishop. And isn't this exactly the same as the last time? So what if simply knight at f6 here? Surely black doesn't have a mate after queen takes here. The white king has a nice square on f1 where he sits quite safely. Oh, did the British girl reach the finals of US Open? Good for you. So black better find something here, or it will all be over. And this bishop cannot leave c5 because it needs to cover e7 and f8. But she played really well at Wimbledon, didn't she? She got to the fourth round or something. So clearly she will be top 10 really soon, I think. I just don't trust the black attack here. Well, pawn at f2 would indeed set up some threats. Now it looks like the black attack is just running out of gas. So this bishop covering some squares, but because if black plays some semi-passive attacking move like knight g3, I think white can just play pawn at e7 with a devastating attack. Just leave the queen hanging on e2. And now maybe, what do you do here as white? You could even go queen b5. I should say queen at b5. Okay, so queen at f8 here. And now what? Another queen with 3 white queens on the board. And not even a threat for black. It looks like white is doing okay here. And indeed he is. Burpcow takes this 7-3. Congratulations to burpcow, who has one tied match and one win. He has shown that he is going to be dangerous in this tournament. VariantsOnly will have to lick his wounds and try to bounce back. He has started with 3 losses and he needs to finish the tournament in style, even though he's out of the race for the first spot. Thank you for watching and see you around. Bye bye.